السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأصلي وأسلم على خير خلق الله صلوات ربي وسلامه عليه. We are in the second lesson in the study of this tremendous book Safinat al-Najah in the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i, and we continue from where we left off. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give us beneficial knowledge and righteous actions. If I can ask the brothers and sisters, the brothers specifically, to come as close as possible, inshallah. In the famous hadith of Jibreel, Jibreel alayhi salam came to teach us the manners in sitting in the circles of knowledge. I know we have gadgets around us and whatnot, but as close as you can. One of the adab that he taught us is that he came close to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can use the back. Anyone that's older or that needs to support the back, no problem. But the shabab at the back, like those young brothers there, come forward inshallah ta'ala. Tayyib. Jibreel alayhi salam, he came as close as knee to knee when he was sitting next to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are from the adab. These are from the manners when we are coming to the circles of knowledge. If we want knowledge, and Allah Azza wa Jal to put barakah in that knowledge, because knowledge is not just data and information that you memorize and that you write down. It's that Allah Azza wa Jal puts barakah in it for you. That Allah blesses it for you. And that you see the khair of it in your life, in your implementation in this dunya and in the hereafter. And if you want that barakah, then we have to apply the adab. From the adab is coming early. It's not from the adab that the teacher is here before you. From the adab is that you have a shower before you come out. That you wear the best of your clothes. These are some of the adab. These adab and this respect that we give to knowledge. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla will put barakah and open the doors of knowledge and give it a place in your heart. If you have gold, and we mentioned this many times before, but this is a reminder, and a reminder benefits a believer. If you have gold or something that is worth something, you don't place it somewhere that is unworthy. You don't put it in the bin. You don't put it, forget the bin, you don't put it in a random cupboard in your house, on the kitchen shelf, or on the dinner table where you eat food. You wouldn't put gold there. You would put it somewhere stored away, somewhere that is protected. Likewise, this knowledge. Al-ilmu, knowledge is more precious than that gold, jewelry, pearls, and it's not befitting except for a clean heart. A heart that is befitting for this knowledge. A heart that respects knowledge. And so just a reminder, inshallah ta'ala, that we always pay attention to these affairs. That, and our mashaykh always used to say this, that a lot of us, we might give attention to al-umur al-zahira, the apparent things, that we have a pen here, that we have a book by our side, that we put on we take a picture at the lesson. These are umur zahiriya, apparent things. La yuhaqqiqu ilman, that doesn't actualize beneficial knowledge. But we neglect the things in the heart. From the purification of the heart, from the respect of the heart, from following those adab that came in the sunnah. The small things before the big things. Wallahu a'lam. Tayyib. Back to our book. We finished last the aqsam al-ma', the different types of water, that water is large and little, and the ahkam that's connected to that. And we'll go on to the next topic now, but before we go on to the next topic, I want to mention two points that I missed out last week or never clarified properly. The first tanbih is when we were talking about the shurut, the conditions in order for us to be able to use istijmar, rocks or leaves or the likes to cleanse ourselves after using the toilet. One of the affairs that one of the conditions was أَلَّا يُجَاوِزَ صَفْحَتَهُ وَحَشَفَتَهُ. And we only mentioned a deficient explanation, which is that the impurity that comes out does not leave its place of impurity. And we said the buttocks specifically, akramakumullah, but it also mentions the front private parts, that a person's front private part, that if they do urine, that it doesn't leave that front area. So it doesn't leave the front nor the back private part. We just mentioned the back, we forgot to mention the front, so that's the first tanbih. The second tanbih is niyyah. When it comes to the intention, when he said, قصد الشيء مقترن بفعله, I mentioned, perhaps or maybe I didn't even mention it properly, that the intention has to be present before the action. When you want to perform the action, then you need to have the intention present. So you're about to perform wudu, before you wash the first part, you need to have the intention. When you go into salah, before you do the takbir, you have to have the intention present. Even if the intention was there before, some of the ulama, they say that's enough, but in the madhab of Shafi'i, it has to be present before the action. So I wanted to make that tanbih as well. Now going to where we left off. We left off on فصل موجبات الغسل. I'll read Arabic, then we'll comment inshallah ta'ala. He says, موجبات الغسل ستة إيلاج الحشفة في الفرج وخروج المني والحيض والنفاس والولادة والموت. He says that the things that necessitate and require from us to perform ghusl, to bathe, are 6 things. If one of these 6 things occur, then you have to have ghusl, which you can shortly and loosely translate it as having a shower. That you have to have a shower if one of these 6 things occur. The first is, and we'll go through each one, he says, إِيلَاجُ الْحَشَفَةِ فِي الْفَرْجِ. That a person, a husband and a wife, 2 spouses, have intimacy and intercourse, specifically penetration. Specifically penetration. And this first point, the mere effect of penetration is mujibun lil ghusli. It requires from us ghusl, to have a shower, even if a person did not ejaculate. سواء أنزل أو أم لم ينزل. Regardless of if they ejaculated and semen came out or it did not. The mere effect of ilaj, ad-dukhul, entering, is a reason for a person to perform ghusl. So let's say they started and they never finished, they still have to perform ghusl, is wajib. Number 2, khuruj al-mani. That semen exits from a person. And that is whether they are awake or they are sleeping and they have a wet dream. The mere cause of ejaculation and semen exiting is a reason for ghusl. Is a reason for ghusl. Making obligatory upon them to have or to make ghusl. And he goes into detail, but we'll skip that inshallah ta'ala. In the next book it will come. Now, number 3, al-hayd. Number 3, the third reason is al-hayd, menstruation. And along with that, number 4, an-nifas, the postnatal bleeding. These are number 4 and 5, or number 3 and 4. Number 3 and 4. And the maqsood and the intent here is بعد انقطاعهما, after the blood is complete and it finishes after menstruation and the cycle has finished, or the postnatal bleeding after giving birth and the blood has come to a stop and a halt, and they intend to now pray, then they have to perform ghusl before they pray, before they make wudu. They have to make ghusl. طيب. Then he says, al-wilada, giving birth. Now, the one that we just had before, we said hayd, menstruation, the monthly cycle. Okay, that's finished. Then he says postnatal bleeding. And nifas is the bleeding that occurs after a woman gives birth to a child. This is a nifas. When that blood finishes, and usually it's around 40 days, it can be more or less, but the ulama mentioned the majority is 40 days. If those 40 days come to an end and the blood finishes after giving birth, then they have to perform ghusl. But then he says straight after it, the 5th reason why it's obligatory to perform ghusl is al-wilada, giving birth. So isn't this like a repetition? No, this is not a repetition, but it's an emphasis and is a more specific point. That number 5 is the postnatal bleeding after giving birth, but number 4, and number 5 is al-wilada, the pure, just giving birth, even if there is no blood that follows on. That it's possible that some women, after giving birth and the child exits, that no blood comes out. Do they have to perform ghusl? They don't have postnatal bleeding. Yes, they still have to perform ghusl. It's still obligatory. And this is especially the case if in today's world we have the affair of C-section. That a complication occurs and they're taken to the theatre and they have to be cut open for the child to be taken out from the stomach. And so maybe no postnatal bleeding occurs, or it's non-visible. Okay, do they still have to perform ghusl? Yes. Just the mere fact of childbirth is a reason is a reason that necessitates al-ghusl. And then lastly is al-maut. Al-maut, death. What does that mean? That if a person dies, they have to wake up and make sure they do ghusl? A person dies, and before they are buried, ghusl has to be made upon them. That they have to be washed before they are buried. And this is something that necessitates and is obligatory, that you have to wash the dead person before they are buried, except for one scenario, which is the case of the shaheed, the martyr that dies on the battlefield. And specifically the one that dies on the battlefield, because there's a hadith that mentions different types of martyrs, 7 different types. That the woman that dies in labor is a shaheed. The person that dies drowning is a shaheed. The one that dies and debris of a building or the likes falls upon them and that causes them to die is a shaheed. There's many types of shaheed, but the shaheed that we're talking about here is specifically the one that dies on the battlefield. The Prophet ﷺ, he commanded us not to wash them and to bury them in that state. Now, these are the 6 affairs. By the way, brothers and sisters, the question and answers, we're going to leave it till the end. So any questions questions that you have, write it down, pen it down, and then we'll take it at the end, inshallah ta'ala. Likewise for the sisters, and they can post it in the Telegram. طيب. That's that. Then he goes into the next chapter. فصل فروض الغسل اثنان النية وتعميم البدن بالماء. What are the 2 obligations of this shower, this ghusl that we have to perform? What are the 2 things that we have to have in our ghusl in order to make that ghusl correct? There are 2 things. Number 1, he says niyyah, the intention. And the intention here is that number 1, you intend by way of it an act of worship and not an adah. Meaning, if it's a hot day and the summer's coming now, if it's a hot day and the person comes home and they jump into the shower, but the intent is they stink, they just want to get clean, then this is their intention. It's not what is going to follow on from the different things that necessitate al-ghusl. This is just for cleanliness. But if I want to do it now for a specific act of worship, like the ajr or the ghusl for Jum'ah, or the ghusl because of one of these 5 things that we've mentioned, like a person is a state of janaba. And janaba is when a person is in that state of ejaculation has occurred, or semen has occurred, or they have had intercourse, then this is called janaba, halatul janaba. They want to exit this state of janaba. How do they exit? They have to have ghusl. So you have to have the intention that you're doing ghusl to remove yourself from janaba. Or a woman that is finished with her menstruation or nifas, or is given birth, and she wants to perform ghusl. She has to have the intention that she's doing it for this reason. Okay? So that's number 1, intention. This intention, it's enough. If you want, you could have it specific for this reason, for menstruation, or raf'ul janaba, or it can be a general intention of raf'ul hadath al-akbar. That it's sufficient that a person intends that they remove themselves from the state of major impurity. Impurity is of 2 types. Minor impurity and major impurity. Minor impurity is that which necessitates from you to perform what? Wudu. Ahsantum. Minor impurity, number 1, number 2, urinating, feces, farting. These minor impurities, the first 2, they necessitate from you wudu. You're in a minor state of impurity, you need to perform wudu to exit that minor state of impurity. Major state of impurity are the reasons that we mentioned in the last fasl. And in order to exit major impurity, you have to perform ghusl. So if you have that general intention of, I have the intention of removing myself from major impurity, then that is sufficient, even if you don't specify specifically janaba or hayd or kada. Is that clear? طيب. So that's the first one, intention. The second is تعميم البدن بالماء, that the water has to encompass your whole body. Now, usually when they say in the Arabic language, when they say badan, then they're referring to the body without the head, usually. But here, it is referring to jami'ul badan, the whole body, including the head. That the water has to encompass all of your body, including your head. So that includes the nose, the private parts, your hair, your nails, your feet. Every part of your body, the water has to touch in order for your ghusl to be correct. It does not necessitate, though, that you make the water go into places that are hidden or that are covered, like the inside of your nose, okay? Or the insides of a person's private parts. All of these affairs that are batin, then doesn't encompass that, it's the outer, okay? And so water encompasses everywhere. This is the bare minimum in order for your ghusl to be correct. And that means if a person, let's say they were going to the sea, that they went into the sea, they made the intention to remove themselves from a major state of impurity, and they dipped their whole body in. They took their breath and they went into the water, the river, or the sea, and they come out. Is that considered ghusl and is it correct? Why? Okay, he says no. Correct? Anyone else? Correct? Anyone else? Correct? اختلف العلماء, but there's jumhur, there's majority. So, it's correct. Why? Because the two conditions are there. This is for the bare minimum. Number one, he made the intention to remove himself from major state of impurity, and he dipped his whole body into the river. But this encompassing of the whole body with water does not necessitate that you have wudu. A person dipped themselves into the river and they came out. Is that wudu? The water touched everywhere though. No, but it didn't go inside your mouth. You didn't do your nose. You didn't follow the order. You don't have wudu. It doesn't necessitate wudu. This is the bare minimum of ghusl we are talking about. There is a sunnah version of ghusl, the more complete version of ghusl, which has wudu within it, which is not mentioned in this book, is going to be mentioned in the next book, inshallah ta'ala. How that goes in the order of it. But this is the bare minimum. The bare minimum is that the water has to reach all parts of your body and your ghusl is sahih. As for the affair of Ahmed, wash or dalk with your hand, that's all sunnah, that's extra. That's going to come later on, inshallah ta'ala. So these are the two affairs. I was about to go back to my normal mode of, is there any questions? We'll close that door for now. The questions at the end, inshallah ta'ala, so we can get through it, بإذن الله. فصل شروط, he mentions now the conditions of wudu. شروط الوضوء 10: الإسلام والتمييز والنقاء عن الحيض والنفاس وعما يمنع وصول الماء إلى البشرة، وألا يكون على العضو ما يغير الماء، والعلم بفرضيته، وألا يعتقد فرضا من فروضه سنة، والماء الطهور، ودخول الوقت، والموالاة لدائم الحدث. He says here now the conditions for the wudu. What are the conditions for the wudu? And then he will follow it up with the nullifiers of wudu. He says شروط الوضوء 10. He mentions 10 conditions, but in fact they are 8. There are 8 conditions, and there's an extra 2 for a specific scenario that we're going to mention at the end. So what are those 8 and then those extra 2? The first he says is al-Islam. The first is that a person has to be Muslim, of course. And this is a condition for all actions of worship. Whether that is wudu, whether that is salah, whether that is any of the actions that you're seeking nearness to Allah, then a person has to be Muslim. Okay? Now, number 2 is at-tamyiz. that they have to reach, or a condition for their wudu to be correct is, they have to reach the age of tamyiz, where they can distinguish between things. And so the ulama, they mention different dhawabit, things that we can use in order to measure, has this person reached the age of tamyiz or not? So some of them, they say specific age, 5 years old. Some say less, some say more. And some say it differs from one child to another. And so what are some of the signs that a person has reached tamyiz? Some of those signs that they mention is أن يفهم الخطاب ويرد الجواب. That he understands that this child, let's say a boy or a girl, that if you speak to them and address them, they understand what you're saying and they are able to reply to you. That they're fully able to comprehend what you're saying and able to reply to you. So this person has reached tamyiz. That's one of the things that they mention. Also from the things that they mention, examples, is that they can clean themselves after the toilet. They can do istinja by themselves. So, for example, they know how to get the water and how to cleanse themselves from number 1 or number 2. This is a sign that they've reached tamyiz. Most children, if they haven't reached tamyiz yet, even 4 years old, then usually they can't do that yet. Here, they also mention that they are able to eat and drink by themselves, meaning they can get their food and they can eat alone by themselves. That they don't need a parent, they don't need someone to help them out, the likes of these affairs. So see, these are just things to help you to identify if they've reached tamyiz or not. طيب, number 3. وَالنَّقَاءُ عَنِ الْحَيْضِ وَالنِّفَاسِ. He says that a person is pure and free from menstruation and postnatal bleeding. If they are in the state of postnatal bleeding or hayd, then they are not able to perform wudu up until that bleeding finishes. Okay, they are not able to perform wudu up until that bleeding finishes. And he says, or the explainers of this book, they say anything that prevents wudu, then that is included in this category here, like al-mani, that a person that has many semen that has ejaculated, in that state of being in the state of janaba, are they able to make wudu? La, they have to go make ghusl, sah? So this, anything that prevents wudu by first having to do ghusl, then this is included under number 3, that they have to be pure from these things. So he mentions here hayd and nifas, and the explainers mention things that are similar to it, like many and other things. طيب, number 4, that a person is also free from anything that prevents the water from reaching the skin. That person is free, they don't have on their skin something that's going to prevent the water from touching their skin. So, for example, on the nails for women, nail varnish that prevents the water, then they have to remove that in order for their wudu to be correct. Or anything else that a male or female can have. I can't think of another example right now, but something that covers their skin that prevents the water from touching their skin. That thing has to be removed. Okay? Number 5. وألا يكون نعم وألا يكون على العضو ما يغير الماء. Number 5 is that there is nothing on your skin already that changes the water. Meaning, there's something on your skin that changes the water so much so that it removes it from the state of being called water. So, he says, the explainers, some of them they mention, كالحبر والزعفران. That let's say they have ink on their skin. A lot of ink, if whilst in the state of performing wudu, it would change the water, the color of the water, then this needs to be removed first before you do wudu, because it changed the water. Changed it so much so now that this is not considered water anymore. It's black. Or za'faran, saffron, yellow saffron, that if it was to be mixed with it, it would change the color of it completely. And we said, if the color changes, the taste changes, or the likes, then it's not considered water anymore. Okay? Even if this thing here we're talking about, earlier we were talking about najasa, here we're talking about even something that's pure, za'faran is pure. But it changes it, it's no longer something that we can, it changes the name of the water to something else. As for, he says, if this thing is little, to the extent that it doesn't affect the water, then it's fine. Let's say there's a little bit of ink that you scribbled on yourself by accident, or you were checking if the pen is working, so you did this. When you're performing wudu, it doesn't have no effect on the water, then that's fine. But as for heavy ink or a lot of ink, and it mixes with the water and it changes and it makes it black or blue or whatever, then you have to remove this first before you do wudu. طيب. Number 6, العلم بفرضيته. That person has to have knowledge that this wudu and the actions that he is doing are obligatory. That the washing of the face is obligatory. The washing of the arms is obligatory. The wiping of the hair is obligatory. That you have knowledge these things are obligatory. As for if a person believes that they are not obligatory, that he thinks if I do it, alhamdulillah, if I don't do it, alhamdulillah, I can still pray. Or taraddada, they have doubt or hesitation if it's obligatory or not, then lam yasih, their wudu is not correct. They have to have knowledge, certain knowledge that the wudu and these actions of wudu that he's performing, specifically those 4 things that we mentioned, the 6 things that we mentioned, that he has to know these things are obligatory. And what are they? Intention, washing of the face, arms, wiping of the head, washing of the feet, and the tartib, following that order. طيب. Number 7, which is similar, is that a person does not believe that any one of these 6 things that are obligatory, that he doesn't believe any one of these 6 obligatory things to be recommended and voluntary. The washing of the face is obligatory. If a person believes that it's sunnah, it's optional, then their wudu is not correct. We do have in wudu some things that are optional, like the washing of the hands at the beginning of wudu. It's sunnah, it's optional. If I miss it out and I don't wash my hands, and I start straight from my head, is my wudu correct? I missed my hands. Is my wudu correct? No. Yes, why? Because it's sunnah. It's extra. Another sunnah is, for example, that you do it between your fingers and the baramij. If I don't do that, is my wudu still correct? Correct, because it's optional, it's sunnah. And perhaps it's pertinent and important to mention here, what's the difference between obligatory and recommended? Obligatory is that which, if you perform, you get reward for, and if you leave off, you get sin. If you do this obligation, you get ajr. If you leave it off and you don't perform it and it's obligatory, then you get ithm, you get a sin. As for the recommended, the mustahab, the sunnah, then if you perform it, you get extra reward, you get ajr. But if you leave it off and you don't perform it, is there sin upon you? There's no sin upon you, there's no ithm. Is that clear? And the opposite is true. There's 2 other categorization that's opposite to that. Opposite to obligatory, we have haram. You have to stay away from it. Okay? If you fall into haram, you get a sin. If you push yourself away from the haram, you prevent yourself from the haram, you get ajr. The opposite of obligatory. Haram, if you perform, you get sin. If you stay away from it, you get reward. And then we have opposite of mustahab, recommended, we have makruh. Makruh is disliked. If you fall into the disliked, then there's no sin upon you. It's disliked, but it's not haram. You don't get sin if you do. And then we have, the disliked, if you stay away from it, on purpose you stay away from it, you get reward. So it's the opposite of the recommended. If you perform the recommended, you get reward. If you don't perform it, there's nothing upon you. The makruh, the disliked, if you stay away from it, you get rewarded. If you fall into the disliked, then there's nothing upon you. And then a 5th category that they mention is something called mubah. It's permissible. There's no reward connected to it and there's no punishment connected to it. Like the eating of a fruit. Apple or pear, both of them mubah, permissible, whatever you like. You don't get reward or sin connected to it unless you have an intention that's connected to it that makes it into one of these four things. So here, that a person has to believe the 6 obligations of wudu are obligatory. And if any one of these 6 things he believes them to be sunnah, then their wudu is not correct. Number 8, and the last condition for normal people, is al-ma'u tahir. The last condition here is that it has to be pure water. So you're only allowed to use pure water to perform wudu. If you use water that is najis, impure, your wudu is invalid. If you use some type of water, but it's not considered al-ma'ul mutlaq, it's not the normal H2O water, it's something else. Like we said last week, what was it? Pepsi, huh? Or anything similar to it. Vimto or squash or anything. Because now when it turns into this thing, you have your water, the original water, then you mixed it with the Vimto or the squash and it turns into this new color. Is this now the final product? Is it called water? No. It's not called water anymore. Even though it consists of water. So al-ma'ul mutlaq, the pure water is the only thing they're allowed to use, not something that's mixed with something else, or water that is najis, impure. طيب. Then he mentions number 9 and number 10. Now, number 9 and 10 are extra conditions for a specific scenario or situation, which is, there is something called a da'imul hadath, that a person is always in a state of impurity because they have a type of illness. May Allah Azza wa Jal cure us and those that are affected with it. For example, salas al-bawl, that they have urine always coming out. Or another type of hadath, impurity, that is continuous. It doesn't stop. Okay? And so they're always in a state of impurity. Then what do? Because it's difficult now. So there's 2 other conditions for them. Number 1, dukhul al-waqt. The time of the prayer has to enter, then they do wudu. Meaning, if they did wudu 1 hour before Salatul Dhuhr, they can pray a sunnah prayer with it, no problem. But that wudu for 1 hour's time and that impurities kept coming out because they can't control it. Can they pray Dhuhr with it, Salatul Dhuhr? No, they can't. Even if Salatul Dhuhr came in and they performed wudu, they would still have impurity coming out. But an exception has been made for them. The condition for them is, to make it easier for them, is as soon as Salatul Dhuhr enters, so Salah is 1:30 Jama'ah, congregation. But Salah comes in, let's say, 1:05. From 1:05, if they perform wudu, then they can keep that wudu and pray with it in the Jama'ah at 1:30. Even if between 1:05 or when they finish, let's say 1:07, till 1:30, that impurity is still been coming out, but this mustathnat is an exception for them because they can't control it. Is that clear? So they just have to look at one thing. Why is it? When Salah enters, I perform my wudu, and whatever happens after that, it doesn't matter up until I pray with the congregation. Is that clear? That makes it easy for them. Number 2, the second condition is al-muwalah. Al-muwalah, which is when that, first of all, you have to have muwalah between the actions of Salah. So, obviously, I don't want to get into intricate details, but I have to mention it just to make this clear. When it comes to the wudu of someone that's not affected by this, then they have to do all the actions in order, yes, and they have to do muwala, but their muwala means it has to be in sequence, but their muwala is up until one of the previous limb doesn't dry. Meaning, I wash my face, then I'm about to wash my hands, and someone's talking to me, and then I go back to washing my hands. If it took 30 seconds or 1 minute of talking, do I have to start from the beginning? No, you don't. If your face is still wet, then you can move on and continue from where you were. The condition is it doesn't dry. And some of the ulama, they say in normal temperatures, it would dry in 3 minutes, 4 minutes, some of them mention. But ala kul hal, that your face doesn't dry, you can move on to continue from where you were. And even more specifically, and I know it's not this level for the book, but just so that you understand, the ulama, they discuss the affair of, are you allowed to separate between your feet, the washing of your feet, and the rest of your body limbs? So you did your face, you did your hands, you wiped your hair, and then you waited a while to wash your feet. Then there is some athar that talk about that. Umar bin Khattab was in a marketplace, he washed his body, but to wash his feet, he went somewhere where he could wash his feet. That didn't have sand. And so that time period. And likewise in your ghusl, that there's a form of ghusl, when the sunnah ghusl, that where you can separate between where you did wudu and the washing of the feet till last. Okay? So there's no specific muwala, there's an exception there. And that's mentioned in the bigger books. طيب, someone that has da'im al-hadath, they have to do muwala, where they wash all those one by one after each other, sequence. Because if they take a break, then impurity might come out. And if they're at home by themselves, if the waqt has entered, Salatul Dhuhr has entered, can they say, okay, I'm going to do wudu, I'm going to go eat, I'm going to do all these things, then I'm going to pray Dhuhr? They have to pray Dhuhr straight after their wudu, because it's an exception. Does that make sense? طيب. Then we go into the next affair of nawaqidul wudu. He mentions some of the nullifiers of wudu. What are the things that nullify a person's wudu? فصل. He says نواقض الوضوء أربعة أشياء. الأول الخارج من أحد السبيلين من قبل أو دبر ريح أو غيره إلا المني. الثاني زوال العقل بنوم أو غيره إلا نوم قاعد ممكن مقعده من الأرض. الثالث التقاء بشرتي رجل وامرأة كبيرين أجنبيين من غير حائل. الرابع مس قبل الآدمي أو حلقة دبره ببطن الراحة أو بطون الأصابع. He says the things that nullify a person's wudu are 4 affairs. The things that nullify a person's wudu are 4 affairs. What are those 4 affairs? He says al-khariju min as-sabilayn, number 1. Anything that exits the 2 private parts, the front private parts and the back private parts. Anything that exits, then it breaks a person's wudu. So, urine, feces, and the likes breaks a person's wudu. Likewise, he mentions letting off gas, then this breaks a person's wudu. Anything that exits from the 2 private parts. Then he says, إِلَّا الْمَنِي, except for semen. And this is clear. Why? Why does semen not break your person's wudu? No. In English, ما يفهمون. English. Why not semen? Ahsant. Because we said the ejaculation of semen necessitates that a person does ghusl. And ghusl and major impurity is bigger than minor impurity. Okay? So it does more. It doesn't just break a person's wudu. It requires them to do something extra because they fell into major impurity. They have to do ghusl. طيب. Number 2. So number 1 is clear cut. Number 2. زوال العقل بنوم أو غيره. It says here specifically يعني زوال العقل, that a person's intellect, mind is taken away either by way of sleep or other than sleep. Like a person falling unconscious, a person becoming majnoon, يعني they've become insane, insanity has happened to them. And this occurs that someone's healthy and then an event occurs or something happens and they fall into insanity, that they lose sanity. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us and cure those that this has occurred to. This breaks a person's wudu, that you lose consciousness due to sleeping or something similar to it, like that you fainted or a person became insane or the likes of these. This removes a person's wudu. Is that clear? But then he says, إِلَّا نَوْمْ قَاعِدٍ مُمَكِّنٍ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ الْأَرْضِ, except for the sleep of the one who is seated and has firmly placed his buttocks on the ground, akramakumullah. That they are firmly seated and their backside is firmly on the ground. He says that the person that is seated like this, then their wudu does not break. Their wudu does not break. And at-tamkeen, what is at-tamkeen? ألا يكون بين المقعد أو القعد والمقر تجاف. He says that firm placement means that there is no gap between the buttocks and the surface upon which one is sitting. And so wherever that is, whether that is the ground, whether that is a chair, if a person is firmly seated and they're sitting up, then this is something that does not break a person's wudu. He also mentions here, the explainer mentions, وَلَوْ مُحْتَبِيًا, even if they were in the sitting position of hugging their knees. So if I was to put my knees up and I was to hold them like this, and I was to go to sleep, then this sleep is considered light sleep and it does not break a person's wudu. Deep sleep is when you're lying down and the likes. As for sitting up and closing your eyes and going to light sleep, then it's not break a person's wudu. But they mention, if a person begins his sleep sitting up, firmly placed on the surface and the ground, and he wakes up and he didn't notice, but he was slouched to one side, down, and he's not now upright anymore. And his backside is not upright and firmly seated. Then, before he notices and he wakes up like that, he's been like that, then that breaks the person's wudu likewise. Is that clear? طيب. There's evidences for this specifically in the madhab, and we're going to stick to what the madhab says. And in the bigger books, you will see the evidence and difference of opinion and the likes, inshallah. طيب. Then he says, number 3. So number 2 is anything that makes you unconscious by way of sleep or other than that, except for a sleep that is light. And what is light sleep? It's upright, sitting up with your buttocks firmly on the surface on the ground. Number 3. التقاء بشرتي رجل وامرأة كبيرين أجنبيين من غير حائل. He says the meeting of the skin of two adults that are foreign to one another, من غير حائل, without any barrier. Here, he mentions the touching of the skin of a man and a woman, kabiraini. Kabiraini here means two people that have reached the age of adulthood, that have reached their had of shahwa. They're adults, they're people that it's possible for them to have desires. Ajnabiyaini, they're foreign to one another, meaning there's no mahramiyya between them, that they're not mahram to one another, that this is not between a spouse, a husband and a wife, this is not a mother and her son, there's no mahramiyya, there's not a brother and a sister. These are two foreign people to each other. There's no mahram relations. Min ghayri ha'il, without a barrier. Okay, without a barrier. That just the mere touching of the skin of the description that we've mentioned now, of a man and a woman that are foreign to one another, that are adults, without any barrier, the mere touching breaks a person's wudu. Whether that is with desires or without desires, that breaks a person's wudu. Whether that is by accident or on purpose. So that means, if you're going to the shop and you've given money and you're collecting change and there's an opposite gender serving you and they put it down and they touch you by accident when they put the money down, like, broke your wudu. Or sometimes nowadays, you're at the airport and they tell you you have to put your finger, you have to get fingerprint. You're doing it and it doesn't work. You try to do it, it doesn't work. And there's an opposite gender and they just grab your hand and they do like this for you. Then it breaks your wudu, this breaks your wudu. The shaking of hands أصلا حرام ما يذكر. الحرام ما يذكر. Okay? So all of this breaks a person's wudu. Okay? No questions. طيب, number 4, write your question down, you can ask at the end inshallah. طيب, من غير حائل, without a barrier. Okay. Number 4, the last one that he mentions is مس قبل الآدمي أو حلقة دبره ببطن الراحة أو بطون الأصابع. That a person touches the private parts of a human being, the front private parts or the back private parts, with the inside of a person's hand, the palm, or the insides of your fingers, not the outer, the inside. Then it breaks a person's wudu, even if that is by accident. So if a person is getting changed, they just had ghusl and they did their wudu and they have everything, mashallah, and they're going out and they're getting changed and they touch their private parts by accident with the insides of their hands, batalat wudu'uhu, their wudu is null and void. If they touch with the opposite side though, then it doesn't break your wudu. But if it's the palm, the insides of your fingertips, then it breaks a person's wudu. Walau sahwan, even if it was by accident. Okay, even if if a mother is changing the diapers of a baby, and she touches the private parts of the baby without any barrier between it, then with the butun al-asabi and the likes, breaks the wudu. They have to make wudu again. Okay. طيب. Then he mentions there's some benefits here. If you guys want me to read, he says that this one here is specifically for the one touching and not the one that is mamsus, that has been touched. So let's say there's a husband and a wife, and one touches the private parts of the other, and the other says, I am fasting. What are you doing, for example? Who broke their wudu? Both of them or one of them? One of them, the one that touched. Okay? As for lams, this is mas. Lams, which is number 3, 2 foreign people, the adults and the likes, the one that touched and the one that was touched, both of them broke their wudu. So here he mentions, and this is an extra benefit, he mentions one of the shuruh, he mentions some of the differences between the two, number 3 and 4, some of the differences between the two. And this is beneficial, inshallah, we'll read some of it. نعم فيما يخالف المس اللمس. How al-mas, the 4th type, differs from al-lams, which is referring to the 3rd type. Number 1, أنه ينتقض الماس دون الممسوس بخلاف اللمس فإنه ينتقض به اللامس والملموس. He says here that the mass, the one that is touching the private part, the mass, then they break their wudu and they don't break the wudu of the one that they are, the private part that they are touching if it's other than their own. In opposition to the lams, the 3rd type, which is any type of touching. That breaks both the person that did the touching and the one that was touched. Like we said, on the counter or in the shop or the likes, if they touch any part of your skin, then they broke their wudu and your wudu is broken too. Number 2, he says, أنه لا يشترط في المس اختلاف النوع ذكورة وأنوثة بخلاف اللمس. That in number 4, it doesn't require that it's a male and a female, 2 different genders. If a person was to touch their own private parts, then that breaks their wudu. If they touch their child's private part when they're cleaning them and they're the same gender, it breaks their wudu. It doesn't necessitate a difference of gender. Whereas number 3 is, it necessitates, it's a male and a female, 2 different genders. He also says, number 3, أن المس قد يكون في الشخص الواحد بخلاف اللمس فإنه لا يكون إلا بين اثنين. That the 4th one, it it can occur to oneself that it doesn't necessitate a second person, that you by yourself, and number 4, can break your wudu if you touch your private parts. As for number 3, then you touching yourself doesn't break your wudu, because it requires 2 people, a male and a female. Number 4, he says the 4th difference, أن المس لا يكون إلا بباطن الكف بخلاف اللمس فإنه يكون بأي جزء من البشرة. That number 4 does not break your wudu, that touching of number 4 does not break your wudu, except if it is with the palms and the inside of your hand. If it was the outer, it doesn't break your wudu. Whereas number 3, the touching in number 3 is any part. Doesn't matter if it's the back of your hand, the front, if it's a person's nose, it doesn't matter what part it is. Any part touches skin, then it breaks a person's wudu. And likewise, the last benefit, he says, اختصاص المس بالفرج بخلاف اللمس. Likewise, the 4th touching, the touching in number 4, is specific to the private parts. As for the touching in number 3, is any part of the body as well. طيب. Those are extra benefits that he mentions there. طيب. Moving on. He says, فصل من انتقض وضوءه حرم عليه 4 أشياء الصلاة والطواف ومس المصحف وحمله. He says, طيب, he says basically, if a person's wudu has become null and void, what is upon them? What are they not allowed to do? He says they are not allowed to do 4 things. If your wudu breaks, you're not allowed to do 4 things. What are those 4 things? He says, حرم عليه 4 أشياء الصلاة والطواف ومس المصحف وحمله. Number 1, prayer. You're not allowed to pray if your wudu is broken. There is no prayer for the one that has no purification, as is mentioned clearly in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that includes any other, whether that is the obligatory 5 prayers or anything else that's considered prayer, like the nawafil, the voluntary prayers. You can't do voluntary prayers without wudu. Likewise, salat al-janazah. You can't do a janazah prayer, the funeral prayer, except with wudu. Why? Because it's salah. And anything that has salah before it, salat al-janazah, salat al-kusuf, salat al-nawafil, al-rawatib, all of these things, anything that has salah before it, then it's considered a prayer. And all types of prayer require wudu. So if your wudu is broken, all of those salahs, whether obligatory or voluntary, then it's haram for a person to do it up until he performs wudu. Number 2, at-tawaf, the going around the Kaaba 7 times is impermissible unless you have wudu. You're not allowed to do tawaf except with wudu. And if your wudu breaks, you have to go make wudu and then do tawaf again. Number 3, وَمَسُّ الْمُصْحَفِ. You're not allowed to touch the mushaf. You're not allowed to touch the mushaf. What is the mushaf? Pass me mushaf. ليس الخبر كالمعاينة. Seeing is not like being told. You're not allowed to touch the mushaf. Not the inside, not the outside, not the cover, nor the inside. You're not allowed to touch the mushaf if you don't have wudu. Now that's number 3. Then he says number 4. جزاك الله خير أخي. بارك الله فيك. Number 4, وحمله. You're not allowed to carry the mushaf. Okay? Ooh. You're not allowed to carry the mushaf. So, let's say you carried it to me, sah? When you gave it to me, if you broke your wudu, are you allowed to carry it back? No, you're not allowed to carry it back. You're not allowed to carry it back. من غير حائل, without a barrier. If you have to get a barrier. You have to maybe get your thobe or the side of your thobe or a jacket or something to carry it with. You can't touch it with your hands. And that is out of respect for the Quran, and there's evidences for that. As for carrying it in a bag that has other things already, that's fine. And even with regards to the Quran, they mention you're not allowed to you're not allowed to touch the Quran, sah, and you're not allowed to touch something that has even an ayah on it, a paper that has one ayah written on it, you're not allowed to touch it and carry that as well. طيب, what if there is a book and there is Quran and other than the Quran in the book, am I allowed to touch it? They say if the majority of that book is Quran, like let's say tafsir, and majority of Quran and explanation of the Quran, the commentary is little, ta'liqat basita. And even these mushafs, many of them, they have small commentary on the side, words explaining. If there's something like this, then you're not allowed to touch it as well. If majority is Quran, you're not allowed to touch it. So the condition is, even if it's an Islamic book, hadith book or fiqh book or the likes, that the Quran is not more than the other subjects or the other things that are being studied. طيب. These are 4 things that are haram upon the person that has performed, that doesn't have wudu. طيب. Then he says, وَيَحْرُمُ عَلَى الْجُنُوبِ سِتَّةُ أَشْيَاء. As for the junub, and what is the junub? What's the junub? Major impurity. Major impurity is specific to? Intercourse and? So, not menstruation. Semen. Ejaculation and intercourse. طيب. This is a janaba. This is when a person is junub. Okay? So if a person is junub, and junaba does not include hayd, it does not include menstruation or personal bleeding, that's separate, and we're going to explain that after. Al-janaba, if a person is in a state of janaba, then what becomes haram for them is 6 things. What are those 6 things? The previous 4, an extra 2. What's the previous 4? Number 1, salah. Number 2, at-tawaf, memorizes. Number 3, the touching of the Quran. Number 4, carrying the Quran. These 4 things are haram for the person that is doing wudu, and also haram for the person that's in a state of major impurity of janaba. And there is 2 extra things that the person in janaba is not allowed to do, and they are on top of those 4 that we mentioned: al-lubthu fil masjid wa qira'atul Quran. The lubth and the staying in the masjid, and أو التردد في المسجد, or keep coming back to it, يعني is between the door and the window, and is inside the masjid. اللبث في المسجد أو التردد إليه, that he's going to it or spending a lot of time in it, then this is not allowed for the person that's in a state of janaba. وقراءة القرآن, and the recitation of Quran, which shows us the person that doesn't have wudu, they're not allowed to touch the Quran, but they're allowed to recite the Quran from that which they have memorized. Is that clear? From ظهر الغيب, ظهر قلب, they are allowed to recite the Quran from that which they have memorized. But when they are in the state of janaba, even that memorization of the Quran that they have, they're not allowed to recite it. The state of janaba up until they perform ghusl. Up until they perform ghusl. طيب. ويحرم بالحيض 10 أشياء. As for hayd, then there are 10 things that become haram for a person to do if they are in a state of hayd, menstruation, and they are the previous 6 things. So what are those things? This side, Ashab al-Yameen. Salah, tawaf, massul Quran, touching the Quran, wa hamluhu, and carrying the Quran, and then al-lubthu fil masjid, staying in the masjid, and number 6, reciting the Quran even from your memory. These 6 things are haram for the junub, and they are also haram for the woman that's in the state of menstruation, on top of another 4 extra things on top of those 6. What are those 4 extra things? They are number 7, a sawm. A woman in the state of menstruation, it's haram for her to fast. It's not allowed for her to fast. What talaq? That it is haram for the husband to divorce his wife if she is in the state of menstruation. It's haram. Talaq, when does it occur? The specific time that you learn in other books, in bigger books, that it has to be after tuhrin, after purification from menstruation, and there is no intercourse that took place. So once they're pure and there's no intercourse that took place, then you can give a talaq divorce that is sunni, that is upon the sunnah. But it's haram to give it in the time of hayd, when they are in the time of menstruation. But if a man divorces his wife at that time, it still counts, even though it's referred to as al-talaq al-bid'i, that it occurred in opposition to the sunnah, but it still occurs. But that's not the time it's supposed to happen. Okay. وَالْمُرُورُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ إِنْ خَافَتْ تَلْوِيثَهُ. To go past the masjid, to even go, so let's say, especially, let's say if it was one floor, and this was one street, and this was another area that she needed to get to, so she went through the masjid. She's not allowed to go through the masjid if she fears making the masjid dirty. If she fears that maybe it will spill or the likes, then she's not allowed to walk through the masjid. As for if she doesn't fear that, then it's fine, she can walk through the masjid. طيب, number 10, وَالْإِسْتِمْتَاعُ بِمَا بَيْنَ السُّرَّةِ وَالرُّكْبَةِ. That a woman that's in the state of menstruation, her husband cannot seek pleasure in anything between the belly button and the knees. That he's not allowed to seek pleasure in anything between the belly button and the knees at the time of menstruation. Outside of menstruation, of course, but then at the time of menstruation, he has to stay away from those parts. So that area, istimta', that a husband seeks pleasure in that area, is haram. So these are 10 things for the person that is in hayd. So that completes a good portion for today's lesson. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop there and we'll continue from next lesson. Babu tayammum bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.